All right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking some time out today to join us. We put a webinar together here just to discuss some changes that we've come across in the Ohio Building Code and Ohio Fire Code that we felt was important to get out there and spread the word about. So, um, presenting today is going to be myself. I'm one of the lead fire alarm designers here at IPS. I've been in my role since January. Been in the industry since '04. Started as an electrician and worked my way through the industry and held many different titles throughout those many years. Helping me along the way it will be Shane Klein. He's our one of our senior sales executives. He's been in the electrical fire alarm industry for combined over 30 years. So combined, we got a lot of knowledge here, and we hopefully will cover this topic fairly well. So, but if you have questions, please ask them. Again, we'll pause at the end of each section just to kind of cover any questions, and then we will have a big open question and answer section at the end to help answer any of those questions. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about Ohio code being enforced right now, some code changes that we have come across that we feel is important that we want to share with everybody. Looking ahead and what we're hearing is going to be coming in the fire code in 2025, and then close this out with a Q&A session. Our goal is about 45 minutes of a slide presentation, so that way we can leave plenty of time for the question and answer session at the end for everybody. So get you back on your day as quickly as possible. We know everybody's pretty busy. So, all right, let's dive right in. We're going to start into the Ohio code currently being enforced. So right now, a year ago, about in August, the Ohio Board of Standards approved the adoption of the new building code, mechanical code, and plumbing codes. Those all took effect on March 1st. I think almost everybody should be aware of that in this industry. All those standards were based off the 2021 edition of the International Code, and those codes are available over on the ICC website with the Ohio amendments, free, to review and to look at. Ohio has contracted with them to get that out there for the public. One code that's currently not been completely updated is the Ohio Fire Code. It is still at the 2017 edition. However, the state fire marshal is working on updating this. They have started the process of reviewing and getting a new fire code out. There's been some changes to how that process works. They do have a draft of the new fire code published for review, so people can make comments and review that. Current process for that, we are looking at the steps here. We have a petition period, which has been completed, and then comments on those petitions. That's all been completed. The comments just wrapped up at the end of July. It's now got to go through 2 review processes with the Ohio State commissions here, committees. And once that process starts, you're looking about 90 days per review. So they're hoping end of this year, but more likely probably the first of next year before we see an updated fire code. Once they get through the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review, they will be starting to publicize the training dates. They will be doing plenty of training, so to cover those changes that's coming. The current rough draft is pretty much the International Fire Code. There's a few Ohio amendments in there, but just like the Ohio Building Code and Plumbing and Mechanical Codes, they're pretty much copying the International Code from 21. So we have something really to go off of what to expect there. So any questions on our code status at this time? Okay. we're going to go ahead and move on into our code changes here. I picked out 3 items that I feel could be beneficial to our ECs and our audience. They've added some new code for abandoned fire alarm equipment. They've added a new survivability level 4 that we'll cover, and then a low frequency sounder requirement change. We'll go ahead and dive into our first one here. Abandoned fire alarm equipment. So it is what it says it is. You know, this is best practice has always been to remove fire alarm equipment. For some reason in 22, they felt like, hey, we need to add this code into the book for reference and for clarification. So now they clearly define, hey, the abandoned fire alarm equipment shall be removed, so we can't leave it behind. And during that process of removal, it needs to be tagged not in service until removed. So kind of give a synopsis of how this works. Most of you probably are aware, but let's say you have a 3-story building and you have a 3rd floor. You're doing the renovation and the update per floor, and you update the 3rd floor, and you get everything on that floor on the new fire alarm system, and then you need to abandon the old system. So what you would do is you'd get the new system up online, and then you would tag everything not in service on the old system and then start removing it. You know, the whole premise behind this is so that way when you are at an emergency exit and you got a pull station, you got 2 there, you know which one to use. It seems kind of silly that we've had to put this in code. I mean, common sense stuff, but again, evidently there's been people in our industry not doing this, so they felt it important to add it. So just kind of wanted to bring that up as an addition to our code. So the next thing we're going to talk about is survivability level. NFPA 72 and 22 added a new survivability level 4. This survivability allows us to now use a 1-hour rated cabling in a 1-hour rated construction. In past, we've been kind of restricted, only having a 2-hour rated cable. This now allows us to have that flexibility to bring in that 1-hour rated cabling in that construction environment when it's needed. You know, this potentially, you know, we identify this as a potential cost savings for our ECs, being able to use that cabling versus a 2-hour rated cabling. So really, it's pretty simple. It's just like all the other survivability levels. In the NFPA 12.4.5 pathway survivability level 4 basically will consist of one or more of the following. It's a 1-hour rated circuit integrity cable or a 1-hour fire rated cable system, EMT or similar, or a 1-hour fire rated enclosure or protected area. So some sort of soffit area that's designed, or a raceway that's designed for a 1-hour rating, or a performance alternative. So if you come up with an alternative way that will survive a 1-hour fire exposure and get that approved, you can use that as well. So that's just your introduction to survivability level 4. Do I have any questions on the abandoned fire equipment or new survivability level?
Remember, you can put your questions in the chat, hop on your mic, text me, email me.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. Moving on to the low frequency notification change. So I'm just going to be transparent. This was our meat and potatoes of, you know, why we wanted to do the webinar today. As this is significant, we identify it as a very significant impact to jobs. So wanted to kind of dig into this a little bit. So what has changed? So per the updated OBC that's currently Ohio has adopted, and NFPA 72, low frequency notification requirements have been modified for the R1, R2 sleeping areas. Okay, this change really is around smoke alarms in the sleeping areas. The only way around this modification or change in code is if a building, an R1, R2, is not requiring a fire alarm system. So if you've got a building, a structure that has open breezeways and they're not common hallways, you just have a sprinkler monitoring panel. This doesn't affect that project. But the moment you enclose those corridors and you get everything inside and you got internal corridors and now you got a fire alarm system, this impacts that project. Prior to this update, we were able to just add low frequency horns in each sleeping area, trigger those on a general alarm, and you had your 120 volt multi or single station smoke alarm, and that met code. Before moving on, we've had a struggle internally defining a sleeping area. So kind of wanted to define that a little bit more based off of what we have found. It's very gray and that's not very black and white, as in what is truly defined as a sleeping area. So NFPA 72 talks about, defines a sleeping area as a dwelling unit where bedrooms or sleeping rooms are located. You know, that to us, that when they add, if they would just leave it at bedrooms, fine, but they add sleeping rooms. So we look to the annex for further clarification. We don't really get further clarification. We just get more confusion because bedrooms or sleeping rooms are separated by other use areas such as kitchens or living rooms, not bathrooms, are considered separate sleeping areas. So there's just not a good, to us, not a clear, definitive answer of it's just bedrooms. So when we go over to OBC and look at that, we see it defines a sleeping unit, not a sleeping area, which again adds more verbiage, more confusion to this conversation. And that definition of a sleeping unit is a single unit that provides room or space for one or more person, including permanent provisions for sleeping, and can include provisions for living, eating, either sanitation or kitchen facilities, but not both. Such rooms and spaces that are also part of the dwelling unit are not sleeping units. So can't get a clear definition. So we can't get a clear definition. Chapter 3 and 72 tells us Webster's dictionary and look up an ordinary accepted meaning of that word. When you try and look up, hey, what's sleeping area mean in the Webster's dictionary, you either can define sleeping or define area, but you can't define the term sleeping area. So I took it a step further. I looked up some legal definitions. According to lawinsider.com, a sleeping area means any room that has a bed, a bunk bed, day bed, or other furniture for sleeping, including and without limitation to pull-out couches or futons. So that last part, pull-out couches and futons, kind of opens up the door to now, hey, we can't just look at bedrooms. We kind of got to look at living rooms as well. And that's really where we couldn't get clarification on. So putting all that together and then also looking at this NFPA 72 annex, back in the annex 18463, talking about the requirements of low frequency signals in areas intended for sleeping. It clearly states here that for this example, this section requires a low frequency audible signal in bedrooms of an apartment and also in a living room or of a living room area of an apartment, as it might have sleeping occupants. So based off of that and all of the information, prior, those definitions, IPS has come together as a team and said, "Hey, look, we're going to put low frequency devices, horns, sounders, basses, and bedrooms and living rooms, based off of what we're seeing here." So just kind of wanted to communicate that out to UECs and kind of give you kind of an explanation of what we're seeing and why we're going in that direction. Because I know sometimes there's questions on whether or not that's actually required, to be a low frequency device in the living room. So, um, so what does the code say? What's changed for the low frequency devices, in these sleeping areas? Um, in the OBC, the 907-52131, for fire alarm signals, in sleeping rooms of group R1, R2 occupancies, the audible alarm activated by a fire alarm system shall be a 520 hertz low frequency signaling complying with the NFPA 72. That hasn't changed. That's been in code for many years. I believe back to 2013 that was added, maybe even prior. So it's been around for a while. That's why we put the low frequency horns in place. So we move down to the next section of code, smoke alarm signaling in sleeping rooms. In sleeping rooms of groups R1 and R2 occupancies that are required by section 90728 or 90729 to have a fire alarm system, the audible alarm signal activated by single and multi-station smoke alarms in the dwelling unit or sleeping unit shall be a 520 hertz signal complying with NFPA 72. Pause there. That's been code. Most AHJs don't have a problem with the current setup, how we have things set up. However, with the adoption of the 24 OBC, the following is an addition to where it says where a sleeping room smoke alarm is unable to produce the 520 hertz signal, the 520 hertz alarm signal shall be provided by a listed notification appliance or a smoke detector with an integral 520 hertz sounder. At IPS, we take that as, hey, you now that the single and multi-use multi-station smoke alarm now needs to produce that 520 hertz signal based off of that section of code. So we started reading into this, started doing some research on this. So, and we wanted to make sure, so we dug into 72, and it just confirms that audible appliances provided in the sleeping area needs the 520 hertz. One thing that I learned during this process of digging into it, was that NFPA also says that in 18425 that standard evacuation signals shall be synchronized with notification zones. So not only do your visuals need to be synchronized, the evacuation signal itself needs to be synchronized. That comes into play here, here in a minute. I'll circle back to that, but we have a few options that we're going to look at as to what we can do. So what does all this mean? To us, we feel like the current design was great, but it no longer meets the code. I reached out to a couple of Columbus's AHJs in our market here and have got confirmation back from them that the OBC 2024 version is what they're going to be inspecting with and doing the plans examining for review. So they're going to be watching for this. And they said to me that, basically gave me a couple options, which we're going to step through here. And of course, they're not going to give us a direct path of what they want to see. They were kind of vague, but they did say they were aware of this change and that they would be enforcing it. So what are our options? So why not put in a 120 volt smoke alarm that produced a 520 hertz sound? everybody agrees that would be the best and easiest solution, and we wouldn't be having this webinar today if that was an option. However, based off of conversations I've had with other parties, other ECs, trying to track this down, doing deep dive on the internet, looking, contacting people, all I hear is that manufacturers are working on a replacement device to meet code, but there is no solution available at this time and with no planned release dates. Do know they're working on it. So that option's kind of dead in the water till they get something produced. Next option, why not just monitor the smoke alarms and have the fire alarm system sound the low frequency horn that's already in place? Again, this is a great solution. We just need to add monitoring modules to each of the units and then set up a correlation or a rule to just sound that unit. However, when you are just monitoring it, you can't disable the notification from the smoke alarm, the piezo sound. Thus, you will now have competing sounds because you have the smoke alarm going off and you have the low frequency horn going off. That can become disorienting to an individual and open up the door for us to have to come back and rework all those 120 volt smoke detectors out and do what our IPS solution that we recommend, and that's replace all 120 volt smoke alarms with system detectors that have low frequency sounder bases. We understand at IPS this is a huge impact on projects, and that's why we're here. That's why we're wanting to bring this out today to everybody. So to talk about the cost impact, we're going to invite Shane to jump in here and talk about what the actual impact is to a project. Shane?
Got it. Thanks, Courtney. Well done. And hey, when you said I had 30 years experience, I happen to know I started at 5 years old, just so everybody's aware. So cost impact, it's quite astonishing, and you'll see it here in a couple seconds. But going from using system smokes versus traditional 120 volt smokes, hit that next slide, please. All right. As Courtney mentioned, currently there aren't any 120 volt battery backup interconnected smoke alarms that provide a 520 hertz sound that we found during our research. We did find battery only. However, we all know those are not acceptable by the AHJs. And that one that was battery only was $280. So I can only imagine what the interconnected is going to be when that comes out. As Courtney mentioned, there are some rumors of a couple of manufacturers going into developing them, but they will have to go through that UL testing before they can launch. And that's actually a long process, and we're not really sure where they're at with that process. So, due to the requirement of the non-competing sounds that Courtney just talked about in the same room, the best solution we came up with that we rely on is the system smokes to produce the 520 hertz and function as a traditional non-system smoke would as well. Go to the next one. So recently, just did a project. We had to design it both ways, to the old code and to the new code. Based on the old code, using the low frequency horns, the project was roughly about $89,000. That was using the traditional 120 volt battery backup smokes. Based on the new code using system smokes, the same project came in at $208,000. That's a 133% increase. That is massive. Part of that increase is it could change the fire alarm panel that we use from an IO to an EST4. Depending on how large it is, how many rooms there are and correlations we have to write. You have more programming on our side. You have more testing. Once the project's complete, it affects the test and inspect agreements that are issued to that. And then the wiring for the EC does change as well. And I mean, that's just everything kind of combines in to that 133%. And that's just parts and smarts from us. That's a massive change. So when you're estimating, we really got to think about a few things, and they're on the next slide here. So things to think about, and if you're estimating, when was the building permit process started? The project that I'm talking about, that permit process was started prior to March 1st, 2024. So the AHJ allowed them to build to the old code. However, if that process had been started after that date, they would have been held to the new code. You don't want to assume this. You would want to have a discussion with the AHJ. So just because you see that date, you know the building permit was pulled prior to that, might be a good idea to have a discussion with the AHJ or the GC on how you want to approach that moving forward. We don't want to get into a situation where you assume that you're okay to bid because it was done before March 2024. You can't afford to get in that situation, and we don't want to see you get into that situation. Any questions on the dates or the non-competing zones or the project impact?
Check the chat. There's nothing in the chat. Does anyone have any questions?
Come on, Brandon Phillips. I know you got one. All righty, move on.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Shane, for that. It's very impactful for the project, and again, that's why we're here, and we want to make sure that we are bringing the best solution possible. And again, we are open to conversations. This is the way we're seeing it through our eyes, but again, we are always open to conversations about how to get this implemented in the field for the end users, and what's the best solution for the end user, best solution for the EC for installing. We want to be aware and in tune to that. So again, any questions about that prior, we can ask at the end, or you can email us, myself or Shane directly, or anybody from the IPS team, and we'll work on getting an answer for you. So we're getting close to wrapping up here. Wanted to kind of quickly cover some updates that I have found that's coming for the new NFPA 72. NFPA 72 is updated every 3 years. And so as we're entering or coming to the close of 2024 here, the focus is shifting and getting into the 2025 code updates. Wanted to kind of highlight some of these that I'm finding that are coming. Obviously, once they come out, we'll dig into them and get a webinar designed for covering those updates. So looking into it, they're looking heavily into updating cybersecurity. Obviously, with current times and how things are changing and being more and more on the internet, cybersecurity is a big concern. So they're going to be updating code to reflect that. They're also going to be adding a couple new detection technologies that we'll need to learn and understand how to install and incorporate with fire alarm systems. One being acoustic leak detection, the other being thermal image fire detection, are two that are coming up that are going to be added. Acoustic leak detection is actually kind of a unique technology that they use sound waves to check for leaks in tanks and sprinkler systems. So that I could see that coming into play. And then thermal imaging fire detection is another that is I could see really taking off with the AI features being built into camera systems and special cameras designed just to watch a certain area for thermal fire, indications or signs. So we definitely see that coming in the very near future. Another update that they're going to be adding. This sounds like it's really going to be in there, and I'm kind of a fan of. Is a new notification operation mode. That mode's going to be the restricted audible mode operation. And doing research on this, it's more for like your MRDD sites or your your daycares or anywhere that has people that have sensitivity to loud noises. This now allows an FEP to take an area and say, hey, that's a restricted audible mode area, and we can use alternate sources of notification like lighted fire signs, strobes. We don't have to have the big horns and make all the loud noises anymore. So it's kind of a unique operation mode that's coming. But again, I like that because I've been in those areas and seen those individuals freeze when they hear the loud noise, and then they don't want to move and get out of the fire. So excited about that change. And then they're going to be adding an intermediary service provider code to really kind of put the guardrails up for these companies. And you guys are like, what is an intermediary service provider? So that is going to be the companies that transfer your fire alarm signals from the fire panel to central station. Before, it was always done through POTS lines, where it was done through the telephone system, which was managed by our government, all the telephone lines. And that's how it communicated to central station. Now there's been a huge influx of cellular communicators out there, network communicators that hit a cloud type environment that then transfers over to a supervising station. So they're just bringing code in to start to keep that managed and watched over. So those are the ones that I've been able to come up with. I know there's a lot of other updates that's going to be coming. Nothing major that I've seen, like the low frequency, but these are just a few items that are on the docket to be added. So with that, I would like to enter into our question and answer time. Again, please feel free to ask any clarifying questions. If you have, something that you would like to talk about solution wise, or if you feel like something we should go a different way, please bring it up. We're open to that at this time.
Again, you can drop your question in the chat. You can text me, you can email me, or you can just hop on your mic and ask. I do have one that someone texted while you were going over some things earlier, Courtney, and it concerns the notion of the non-competing sounds. Why is that a concern, and are the AHJs checking for that?
It's a great question. So AHJs have brought that up as far as, hey, they need to be synchronized and they need to be the same sound. So a smoke alarm device has a piezo sound and it is a temporal 3. So if you think about the sequence of operation, that smoke alarm goes off and that piezo starts sounding, and it starts the temporal 3 sound, and it's going off. And then the fire alarm system kicks in because, hey, that's gone off. Now we start sounding the low frequency horn. That low frequency horn now is sounding a different tone at a temporal 3 pulse that is off sync of the smoke alarm. And those two competing sounds can become disorientating and can cause confusion, according to researchers. So that's some of the reasons why we are getting away from that. We don't want an AHJ to walk in and say, hey, the tones aren't synced. You got to sync them. If you can't sync them, then you got to figure something out. So that's the answer to that question.
Gotcha. And then right as you were starting to answer that, another one came in, pretty kind of similar. So just to clarify, obviously, you know, some of the things we talked about, especially the whole low frequency thing, is going to have a cost impact on projects. So we are sure that AHJs are enforcing it, and it sounds like we are.
Yeah, we are. And then we did our due diligence before coming to the table here. You know, like I said, we've reached out to many different AHJs about this, and reached out to even up to Reynoldsburg about this directly, saying, "Hey, what's going on here? Is this really being going to be enforced because of you can't these devices aren't available, the direct replacements aren't available?" And they're like, yeah, this is really happening. This is the directive that we're going to be moving forward with the fire inspectors, fire marshals to be watching for this. So I look for them to put a heavy emphasis on this, especially once the Ohio fire code comes out from the fire marshal. We kind of right now with the building code and the fire code being all out of sync, there's a window, but I strongly believe that once that fire code is passed and they start training their marshals, we will see an impact here. And we don't want to do a project and then come back and go, oh, we've got to add all this and that, you know, in the front end, $208,000, you know, 133% increase of the project could end up being several 100% of an increase because of the rework. So we're trying to avoid that.
Okay.
Yeah, Taylor, they're definitely looking at it. We actually have a project that's closing out downtown right now, 2 high rises, and it started 18 months ago. And they actually brought it up to us when we went and tested as to why there's competing sounds. And we had to remind them that, hey, this building permit process was started 18 months ago. You can't hold this to the new code. So they're obviously aware of it. And the city of Cincinnati is definitely going to push it. They're very aware.
Gotcha. Tim
Yes,
McHugh. Well, sorry, Courtney, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just answering the chat question. Yes, it will be available.
Yep, I was just typing that too. Yes, the presentation will be made available.
And also, Taylor, I will send you the latest revised draft of the Ohio Fire Code as well out, so that way that can be out. So
yep, we'll send all kinds of follow-up materials as well as a link to the recording for the presentation. That way you can refer back to it. Tim McHugh, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, good morning, guys. Courtney, Shane, first off, thanks for pulling this information together. Very, very informative. Just, you know, with the continued amount of development we see in multi-tenant housing, you know, in places like Columbus and Cincinnati, just confirming that when one of those, you know, in bedroom devices activates, that's still allowed to transmit a supervisory signal to the central station. Is that correct?
yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that'll be a supervisory just for that unit. And then the notification will sound just in that unit, nowhere else in the complex, just in that unit.
Is there any exception to that if the room is designated ADA?
It's still that's the same current practice. It's a supervisory signal and not an alarm condition at all.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
All right. Any other final questions out there? No, it was a lot of information. Nothing in the chat, nothing in my text. You were all caught up there.
All right. Well.
Oh. Just had a question pop in.
So
this is only for corridor buildings is our question.
Yes, so that it's for any building that requires a fire alarm system. So for R1, R2. So if they have open breezeways or are able to get it away from the fire alarm system, you don't have to worry about this. However, if there is a requirement for a fire alarm system, then this all plays into that.
Gotcha. Anything else from anyone? Okay, well, with that, I do want to thank Courtney and Shane from IPS for taking the time to put this presentation together. As you can see, IPS, we want to provide you with the knowledge that you need to make your project a success. That's why we wanted to go ahead and kind of get this out there, so you all are aware of it. With that said, as you digest the information, if you have questions later on, if you need to go through some things specific to a project that you're working on, just please do know you can always reach out to IPS. We are more than willing to answer questions, and we would rather go through things ahead of time rather than maybe not having someone ask a question and then scrambling at the end of a project to make sure that you are doing everything correctly. So if you need a one-on-one demo or have questions as it relates to a project or just questions in general about the code, feel free to reach out to myself, your IPS account rep, or our engineering team if you have their contact information. And if not, we will get you hooked up with them to give you the knowledge you need to make your next project a great one. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for their time, and we will be sending out some follow-up information. So keep an eye on your inbox for all that. And thank you.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah,
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Yeah, that was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.